Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Health and Wellbeing Scrutiny Committee, the first one of 2025. It's Monday, 27th of January. Have we got any apologies?
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillor Bailey.
Do we have any declarations of interest? No declarations of interest. Oh, Councillor Peters. Thank you. All good. First of all, before I go and go to the other items of the meeting, I'd just like to give a warm welcome to Midia, who's our new Interim Democratic Services Officer. She's given a supporting officer's role. And being as she's a new member, we'll just go around clockwise, starting from Dan and introducing ourselves.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Daniel Corkett, the Democratic Service Officer.
Michael Hovers, Communities Open Facilities Manager.
Charlie Birtles, Audience and Participation Development Officer at the Borough House.
I'm Ruth Shaw, Head of Primary Care at Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent ICB.
Thank you. And Paul Edmondson-Jones, I'm Chief Medical Officer at the ICB.
Philip Atkins, I'm a Staffordshire County Councillor on the Health Scrutiny Committee.
Good evening, Councillor Alison Legg.
Councillor Bernard Peters, representing Bristol and Code.
Councillor Colin Wellman, also representing Bristol and Code.
Councillor Laura Beach, representing Strampton and Weaver.
Good evening, Councillor Holton for Burton and Eton.
And Councillor Thomas Hadley, Chair of the Health and Wellbeing Committee, and Councillor for Burton and Eton as well. Okay, so number 3, to consider any urgent business brought forward to the meeting under Rule 12. I'm not aware of any urgent business for the meeting. And straight into number 4, Gordon Street Surgery. I now invite Ruth and Philip from the Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent Integrated Care Board to provide an update.
All right, if I go first, just really I just want to sort of set out where we are, and then Ruth's going to take us through some detail on what's happened. I can't remember exactly when we came, but it must be about 6 months ago now, I think, that we came, and we updated you on where we were with Gordon Street. So, if you remember, we made the decision as an ICB that we were going to terminate the Gordon Street contract as was in early 2024. And the contract officially finished on the 3rd of May. Contract was then taken over by East Staffordshire GP Partnership on the 7th of May. And they're made up of, that partnership's made up of local GPs who really wanted to improve things for Gordon Street patients and wanted to be part of the solution. The former partners who owned the building, and I can't remember whether we were able to be absolutely frank with you last time we were here or not, but the former partners who owned the building wouldn't agree to allow the services to continue there, and therefore we had to find alternative accommodation. Outwards House was found as the temporary solution, and we also told you last time that we were here that we were beginning a dispute process with the former partners over the termination. That dispute is now finished. The decision to terminate the contract was upheld, and my understanding is from the partners that they will not be taking it any further. So that dispute is now, as far as we're concerned, is finished and done. So we're here to update you tonight. What I suggest we do is then go through, Ruth will take you through briefly a number of updates on a number of areas, and then we're very happy to answer any questions or try and provide any further information that you want. Thank you, Ruth.
Thank you. Right, I've got a few notes here. don't be alarmed, I'm not going to read them all out verbatim, so I'm going to go through kind of some of the key points, then if anybody wants to discuss anything in more detail, then obviously we can do that. So the first one is around the building. So as Paul said, we are in a temporary building at the moment that was Queen's Hospital that came to our rescue in terms of accommodation and gave us that building to use, and it is temporary. We made no secret of it last time. It's not ideal. The previous provider in the old building, they had 11 consulting rooms available to use. In this current setup, they have 5, so it is more challenging. And I know that you're going to be really wanting to know what the future plans are. Now, the timing of this meeting is, if we were here in a couple of weeks' time, we'd be able to share with you some really exciting news about the estate and a development around that, but we can't at the moment just because we are finalising some details, some minor details. Some of you might have heard some rumours, but we can't kind of officially confirm anything. But when we are in a position to share it, we'll share it with you, and we also want to share it directly with the patients as well. We don't want them hearing things third hand and causing any confusion. So I'll just put a pin in the estate bit for now. One of the requests that were made to us last time we came to this meeting was, well, myself and Paul were quite confident that we could report some improvements after having the new provider in place for a while, so we committed to come back and share what those improvements were. We do have limited published data at the moment since April, but we do have some that we can share at the moment. One of the things that we talked about was a particular concern around childhood immunisations, so they just weren't happening as much as they should be. With the old provider, we can report there's been a 2% increase in the first 2 quarters of 24-25 when compared to the same time last year. Now, that is the first 6 months of mobilisation for the new provider as well, so it's quite impressive that they've managed that during that time as well. Cervical screening, something that we've flagged as an issue. We don't have the data on that yet, but early indications and from the soft intelligence we've got, we are expecting to see a huge improvement in the rate of cervical screening. Learning disability annual health checks. Apologies if I'm telling you something that you already know, but this is an annual health check that people with learning disabilities are entitled to, and it's really beneficial because it very often picks up health issues that might not have been noticed otherwise, and it's actually been there's evidence to say it can actually save lives doing those learning disability health checks. So there's been a huge improvement. In December just gone, they'd completed 46% of those LD health checks compared to the previous year, which was 26%, so you can see a huge kind of difference with that, and we're hearing a lot of good feedback about their engagement with community mental health workers, that kind of thing. But one of the things that I did want to share that isn't really measurable in terms of data and stats is if you've read the CQC reports of the old provider, there were things in that report that quite basic things that needed to be addressed. So it was things around the culture of the practice and the leadership of the practice, and also things like governance. So what the provider have done is spent a lot of time fixing a lot of those things, those kind of basic things that needed to be looked at, and they've done a really good job. The patient feedback, you'll be familiar that we have an annual patient satisfaction GP survey. That's out at the moment. It runs from January till March. Gordon Street were famously in the bottom percentile in the whole country in terms of patient satisfaction. So we're really looking forward to seeing those results. But in the meantime, the provider has been doing a friends and family test, which is you might go to your GP and get a text afterwards asking you to rate the service and provide some comments. So we do have that. We've got over 1,000 patients that have responded to that. Nearly 88% of those patients have responded positively, which is good. Obviously, there are some people in there who have rated it as not very good, but we're really pleased with that 88%. Some of the themes that have come through that are they found it easy to book an appointment, improved telephone access, and helpful staff on reception. Now, again, if you're familiar with Gordon Street and some of its history, some of the themes were particularly around access and helpfulness of staff on the phone. Now, I'm not going to pretend that this practice is absolutely perfect and everybody who phones up can get through on the phone immediately. I don't think we have any practices like that, but it's really, really good to hear some of that feedback. Some of the negative feedback isn't surprising. It's mainly around the building, so consulting rooms that are too small, a reception area that's too close to the waiting area, that kind of thing. So not surprising, and very much linked to the estate. And then just really quickly, just to update you on the procurement. So when we terminated the contract, we did put the caretaker in place, the Staffordshire Partnership, and we put them in place for 12 months. And the plan was we were going to run a procurement process, go out to tender and secure a long-term provider to run that contract. Because of the dispute, we had to pause everything, so we were not able to run a procurement during that time. So what we've done is East Staff's Partnership, thankfully, have agreed to continue the contract for another 12 months to allow us time to run a full procurement, which we're starting now. So it's really important that we engage with patients. We want to reach those kind of hard to reach communities. We are going to be writing to patients. Letters will be landing in the next 2 weeks, asking patients to complete a survey, give us their views on what they want around the future of Gordon Street. That will be, those letters will be sent in English and also Urdu, because we recognise that a large proportion of the population, English is not their first language. We're going to have posters up, we've got QR codes for people to access them, and we're also going to hold some community engagement events where people can come speak face to face and give us their feedback. So it would be really amazing if you can help us kind of get the word out in terms of getting that engagement with the patients. So in terms of timelines around that, engagement starting pretty much now. We'll then start the formal procurement process around March time, and what we're aiming for is to award that contract in around October, November, and then that will give us some time to mobilise. It might be a new provider, it might be the same people who are running the contract now. So I'll stop that because I said I wasn't going to talk very much, and then I've just given you loads of detail and I've probably sent you to sleep. But shall I just hand it back over to Paul?
Yeah, and just to, before we do questions, just to emphasise that 3 points really. One is the new provider's in. I think the new provider has done a really, really good job. They had a really tough job taking over, not just the practice, but also the premises. We had to get them into the premises. We had to get used to that, had to work with everything. I think they've done a really, really good job on that. The procurement's starting soon. We can't go beyond 2 years, I think I'm right in saying, in terms of that. So the procurement will go ahead this year. There will be a new contract in place at the end of that time. So it's great. We've got the same caretaker for another year. Give us that stability. And then the final one was just to remind you what Ruth said at the beginning, is that we will have some news on premises soon. We think it will be... we think people will be pleased to hear the news, but we can't share it with you at the moment, hopefully within the next 2 weeks. And hopefully we will share that news before the letters on the new procurement go out. We'd like to get it in that order to do that. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you for the update. That's very good. Any questions from councillors? Councillor Peters.
Thank you. You're excited, aren't you? I could tell. Really, really encouraging. And the smile on your face speaks volumes. Just a couple of things. When you talked about immunisation, have you been able to cope with RSV injections during this period, particularly thinking of the vulnerable?
So we've actually got a programme of work around RSV for all of our practices in Staffordshire. Our public health colleagues are leading on a lot of that. The short answer is yes, there's been some targeted work around the vaccinations, and that includes Gordon Street patients.
There's a big focus on that at the moment, isn't there?
There is.
Yeah.
Can I just say, as a public health consultant as well, that overall I think we've got, nationally, I think we've got about a 45% uptake. We would love to get more uptake. So anything you can do to get the word out to the right groups and so on, to to go and get vaccinated. It has caused a lot of problems this year, a lot of ill health. It's a simple vaccination, and really, if you can do anything to help.
Yeah, I've had it, so I know.
Have you? Yeah. Well done.
My colleague over here is pregnant, so I do hope she's in that group, isn't she, of people who should be looking for it? Or is she? Oh, you've had it. Google it later. Chair, the next point I was going to mention was, I heard you say the practice is not perfect at the moment. So if I could just frame that in the context of safeguarding, RGCP guidance is quite clear on the process and compliance. So what assurances can you give the committee, and how assured are you that safeguarding is not an element that's been overlooked, if I could use that very general comment?
So it's part of it's called the JMS or an APMS contract, which is the contract that's held by East Staffordshire Primary Care, I've forgotten what they're called, GP Partnership, the partnership. Adherence to safeguarding guidelines is within that contract that they do have to adhere to. When they first set up, because they formed an organisation specifically in order to deliver this service, they were inspected by the CQC, who also look at safeguarding. So that's quite a recent. So they're not. It's not like a proper rating that the CQC gives them, but the CQC goes and checks and makes sure that they are adhering to all of the policies and the guidelines to give them a CQC registration in order for them to deliver that service. So we are assured around safeguarding.
Just one last thing, Chair, if I may. Is there a relationship to build up again with local pharmacies? Because the ever-increasing role of pharmacies in the GP world, as it were, is that something, a pathway that you've been exploring?
Absolutely. So we're responsible for commissioning the pharmacies as well. Some of you might have been familiar with the Pharmacy First scheme, which is where you will phone up your GP practice, tell them what your problem is, and actually they'll say, do you know, we can refer you to the pharmacy down the road, you don't need to come to us. They are part of that scheme. We're actually, as an ICB, we're one of the front runners when it comes to the community pharmacy referral scheme. So absolutely, yeah, they play a vital role, especially when they're operating in quite a small premises at the moment. So we need to make sure that people who do attend need to be there.
Thank you. Any other questions, councillors?
Councillor Holton.
Hello. Thank you for that overview report. It was very positive. It sounds very positive. Having been a patient of Gordon Street Surgery for a long time, and since transitioned over to the new practice, I can report, for me and a child I made an appointment for recently, that it is positive, in actual fact. On the morning that I rang for an appointment, there was not one available, and unusually one was offered the next day without a request to ring at 8 o'clock on that next day, which, yes, was quite unusual, and one that I've not experienced ever really from any practice. And that appointment was kept and was dealt with. However, I want to ask a couple of questions. I wasn't at the last meeting, so what I want to ask you is, were any of members of staff, whether a doctor or the receptionist, were any of the members of staff on Gordon Street offered an opportunity to be tubed over? And if they were, did they accept? And if they accepted, are they currently any of that member of staff still present at the surgery?
So there's a couple of bits. In terms of the doctors were GP partners, and they were the holders of the contract, so they are not entitled to TUPE over. Okay. So none of the doctors came over in terms of the staff to the new contract. All of the staff that were employed, so your receptionists, admin, nurses, they were all offered the opportunity to TUPE. I don't think all of them did. A large proportion did and moved over. Some of those staff have now left. I believe, although I might have to just double check the numbers with the provider, but I believe that there's a couple of original staff members left, but actually I think a large proportion have moved on. but they were all offered the opportunity to move over.
Lovely. And another couple of points. Improvement. It's always good to hear the improvements, of which there are many. Can you give us a little bit more on how you've managed to do that? How have they managed to do that? I mean, you talked about an increase in improvement in child immunisation, cervical screening, annual health checks, for learning difficulty, patients suffer from learning difficulty, community mental health. That's a lot of improvement in a short period of time. Can we elaborate on that?
Yeah.
In any of those?
I
And how
mean,
they've managed to do that?
Yeah, so it's not us at the ICB that's responsible, it's not us that's done it, it's the provider that have done it. So one of the issues that we had with the old contract holders was they didn't have particularly good governance processes in place. They didn't have good kind of systems and processes for checking, recalling patients, that kind of thing. So there was a lot of, when I mentioned earlier, the kind of the basics, the kind of systems and processes. So the new partnership, they've got a really experienced operations manager, they've got a business manager in place, and they've also got a very, very experienced retired practice manager who's been coming in and consulting and guiding the admin staff as well with a lot of those bits. So I'd say it's, I mean, I'm sure they'd love to come and talk to you about it themselves and share more information, but it's very, very much around kind of robust leadership, strong governance, good systems and processes, and good staff training and empowering staff to do their jobs and to do them well.
Good. And last question, if I will, Chair, thank you. Language barriers. So as you mentioned, as people are aware, the majority of patients do come from urban areas. You also mentioned as a term that is regularly used, really, hard to reach, which I challenge and I want to ask, why are those communities hard to reach? And it's not just the ICB who uses that term, but I feel sometimes the term is used quite loosely, and what are we doing around those supposedly hard to reach communities? How are we breaking down the language barriers to make them into communities that can be communicated with and that can be accessed, and that they can access our services or your services in this case? Because I would challenge that they're not actually hard to reach.
I know. I think you're right. I think it's a fair challenge, and it's probably NHS jargon that we're used to using. When we started this process with Gordon Street, we learned some lessons really quickly, and you learn lessons quickly when you get things wrong. And I think our initial communication out to the public, I think we sent a letter that was in English, and a lot of patients didn't understand it. We were doing things quickly, and we dropped the ball a couple of times. So we very quickly engaged with, there's a local community champion, you might know her, who works very closely with us. She supported us in terms of how we can get the messages out there, what language to get those messages out. We very quickly then, any kind of written communication, FAQs online, that kind of thing, we made sure that they were translated into Urdu. We do have some trusted GPs as well, obviously, who work with us at the ICB. And one of those actually did a video for us and translated it so that was easy to understand for that population. Moving forwards, all of our communication is going to be both in English and in Urdu. We've got links, everything online. There'll be links to the different languages. Our community engagement events and the face-to-face events, we are working with our community champion colleague to plan those, and we will have Urdu-speaking GPs at those events as well as other ICB staff. So. Any suggestions, if we can make it any better, and obviously we're willing to hear them, but yeah, we learnt a lot over the last 12 months and we're applying that now.
Okay, thank you, Ruth. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Wildman, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. Can you just give me an idea where, obviously, your new area where you are now, near the hospital, are you getting any feedback as regarding people getting to the actual to your new premises?
Yeah, so we have had feedback around the premises. I think before we even moved the practice in there, we were having some feedback around it. Some people say it's great, it's easy to find, it's easier to get to than the old practice. But there are people that struggle, so I think there's a bit of a walk.
Yeah, that's what I was really thinking of, to be honest.
There's a walk from the car park to the building. We have had feedback that I think there's very limited disabled spaces outside the practice. So if you've got several patients with a disability, they're not able to park right by the practice. So yes, we are getting feedback about the location, and that's why that location isn't ideal. It saved us in terms of having somewhere to deliver services from, but it's not ideal.
Yeah. I mean, I know exactly where it is, obviously, and if I'm honest, once you hit the signpost, no problem at all. I think it's just when you're actually in Gordon Street, there didn't seem to be any signs that were heading out. Get on Shobnell Road, no problem. Yeah. Sorry, Dallow Road, over Dallow Bridge. There was no problem. And I just wondered, not everyone can drive and so on, and I was just wondering how people get up there and so on. And hopefully, fingers crossed, they won't need to soon. And you also mentioned regarding a new contract. I think it was between possibly October time. It's going to be awarded. How long would that contract be, and so on?
So normally we want to award it for a long time. So generally at the moment, but don't quote me on it because it might not be exactly this. Generally, we award contracts at the moment for 5 years plus 4. So it will be a 5-year contract with the option to extend it for a further 4 years if the provider is doing a really, really good job. Historically, when we had GMS contracts, so the previous contract was a GMS contract and they are in perpetuity, they never have an end date. We are not able to award GMS contracts anymore. They are APMS contracts, which are the shorter term, but we can dictate kind of the length of that. So it's striking a balance between having it kind of long enough, but equally you need that slight bit of competition, because if you've got a provider who's got a contract forever, where's the motivation to provide a good service? Okay.
Thank you. Any other councillors? Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for coming back to it after 6 months, like from last time. What I'd suggest is that if we can get the posters or online version of the posters, we can send it through our social media. So just even like Dan or Mike can pick that up, that'd be great. Thank you very much. Yeah, so that's it. You're welcome to stay, of course, but I understand that you might have trains to catch to get back to is it Yorkshire? I think it is. Yeah, that's you. I'll drive back. That's too bad. But again, thank you very much for your participation and thanks for coming to this meeting.
Can I just say thank you for your support?
We'll try and make it a bit harder for you next time then. That's all good. Brilliant. Yeah, appreciate the feedback. Thank you, and have a safe journey. Yeah. Cool. So, moving on to the agenda item 5, questions from the public. We have any questions from the public? We have not received any questions from the public. So, going to item number 6, questions from members of the committee. We have not received any questions from the members of the committee. Sorry, I'll just leave it and leave. So going on to item number 7, public minutes from the previous meeting on the 12th of November 2024. I propose the approval of the public minutes from the previous meeting. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Holton. We'll now go to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hands. And that's unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Okay, all good. Item number 8 then, the new play equipment. Now, some people might be a bit confused why this is on the agenda at the Health and Scrutiny Committee. It's basically because I had an email from, funnily enough, one of my colleagues, Councillor Huckabee, saying, and I'll just sort of read parts of it out to you now. Saying that there's concerns about the specifically the washlands play equipment being installed, and basically that has been prone to flooding, as we all know. And he's saying there's concerns regarding like the sludge being consistent of human sewage and other pollutants that might get on the play equipment. So he wanted to question what can be done and what's the scale of it, and are there any things in place to prevent this, you know, an outbreak of such bacteria, such as E. coli. So just for those online, I've got a prepared response from Julia Baker, and then we'll open it to questions if appropriate. So Julia Baker, who's the project manager, says the play area at the Washlands has not yet been handed over to the council, and so does not yet form part of its ongoing management and maintenance schedule. Prior to handing this over, the provider will be required to ensure the equipment is inspected and signed off, which will include review of ground and equipment conditions. In the meantime, regular checks are being undertaken by the contractors to ensure the play area is fit for purpose. Once the handover has completed, the management of the equipment will fall under the council's routine schedule and approach. Are there any questions on agenda item 8? No, no questions. Okay, I'll move on to agenda item 9. Scrutiny review program update. I now invite the Communities, Open Spaces and Facility Manager and the audience and participation development officer to provide an update.
Thank you, Chair. We have completed 2 scoping paper reviews with the members of the committee. They're both out for approval at this moment in time, so I'll just go through the scope of the knife crime review. And the minute that the draft paper is asking the question around what is the prevalence of knife crime in East Staffordshire, the wider West Midlands region in the UK, to give us an idea of the prevalence. Also the demographics of any victims and offenders, and clearly what the impact on their lives has been, because that can be catastrophic. Any influencing factors that lead people to carry a knife or a sharp implement. And then also to look at any support services or programs that are currently in place for people that are carrying knives, just to stop them from using knives as well. And then there's kind of a follow-on secondary question to that. Are there any examples of best practice that we think could be imported into East Staffordshire? So just waiting on the subgroup membership to sign off that draft scoping paper. Chair, I would just point out we do need an additional member for that subgroup. We've got 3 councillors, we need 4. So if there's any volunteers that would like to join the knife crime subgroup.
Thank you. Are there any questions on that? Or Councillor Peters?
Mike, I wonder whether the emphasis might shift with the current debate that's going on following the Southport incident and the conviction and the prevent agenda. It seems one hell of a different dynamic to what it was before we put this item together. And we don't want to be left behind on a bigger picture that's going on. Do you think it's appropriate to re-look the pathway, mindful of what Southport are saying?
I wonder if that's something that we should consider as part of the ongoing review, knowing how nationally there might be a looking to prevent. I wouldn't want to preempt that, but it might be something we need to be cognizant of as we're doing the review throughout. It is a good point, really, because that's come onto the agenda recently, hasn't it, with Southport.
It's fairly recent, Chair, but I thought it was worth just asking Mike's view on it, because it's in everyone's mind, and it's in the press continually what happened in Southport and the perpetrator and how he got through the net and all that sort of stuff. But knife crime in general seems to be back on the up, as it were, and it's a frightening prospect, isn't it? Innocent people walking down the street being stabbed. Goodness gracious. So I'm really looking forward to this piece of work coming out with some really positive conclusions.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, and absolutely. It's important that it doesn't go out of date as soon as it's published. So yeah, it's a fair point. Any other questions, Councillor Holton?
No, not a question. I know originally, because I was on the other subgroup, I'd decided not to join the knife crime committee. I mean, because of my own time commitments. But I'd like to volunteer on this occasion, please. Moving forward.
Well, I'm certainly happy to have you on the subgroup with me as well. Excellent. Thank you very much. Thanks for that, Councillor. Okay, so Michael.
So there's the other review as well. That I'll just give you a very quick explanation of where we are with that. So members will recall last time we talked about the subject being care of the elderly. Really, really useful discussion with members. Having spoke with members, that's going to be more of a focus on access for services for the elderly because of the modernisation agenda. There was a sense, I think, from members that with so many different services moving online, with internet or phone-based, how are those elderly people that perhaps less tech savvy being catered for, but not just elderly people, have discussions then moved on to vulnerable people that don't necessarily know how to use the internet or things of that nature. So we're going to look at what services are currently in place for elderly and vulnerable residents and how they can access those services and promote it everywhere. And again, we're going to try and look at any best practice that's out there and what can be brought into East Staffordshire and what can be learned from those authorities. And we also want to talk to any third sector organisations around the support that they have for elderly residents. So that's changed slightly since we last had the scrutiny group meeting, but a really good discussion with members about what they wanted to get out of the review. That draft's just been shared this evening, so again, that will need signing off by members. So as soon as you can give us the green light, we'll start making those arrangements with the different partners that we want to talk to.
Lovely, sounds good. Any questions on that group? Councillor Peters.
Again, a topic that's coming into everyone's mind now. I don't know whether you could weave this in, Mike, but fraud. Fraud now is something that's being publicised daily on the TV channels, if you watch them. And older people get the phone call and they're away, giving personal details. Vulnerable people again. And I have to say, pre-pandemic, I got a phone call, the classic one, that said, "This is from your son, Tom. Can you send me 50 quid, Dad?" And I nearly did. It's so easy to fall into that trap when they throw a loved one or a relative into the conversation. So I wonder whether there's anything there, Mike, about giving... there are pathways to help people deal with fraud. But older people now seem to be so vulnerable to being ripped off, as it were.
Yeah. I've sat listening very carefully. And what Councillor Peters has just mentioned is quite true. The world, I think what your problem is the world is moving so quickly. QR codes, for example, everybody's saying doing that, but I've had an experience in a car park where I've got to catch the train at Rugeley, and I used the QR code, and all of a sudden I was paying £30 a month for some music that I didn't really want. So luckily I paid for it by Barclaycard, so I stopped the payment and warned them to tell the people that they got it. But you can't hack one of these, a pen and paper, which is where by the time they've finished watching daytime television, as Bernard has pointed out, I think I'd trust this rather than anything that's electronic. And I've just had since Friday in the wind, I haven't had any internet. And it's quite an interesting thing with a digital phone. So I've got a digital phone, I've got no digital line, I've got very poor mobile signal to report it on a mobile for about an hour, going through all the different things. And then because I've got my mobile, I found out I got an answer phone message on my landline, which I couldn't get into, to tell me that they were coming out to have a look at it at the beginning of the week. So there's you know, while we're going digital, remember that it's got its failings, and we've got to have some sort of backup while we're heading in that way. And just touching back to the previous item and knives, even the thing of having online sales of knives, which you have actually got somebody in Burton who's been warning about that for years, where you clamp down on the retail side, but online has just been a Wild West cowboy arrangement at the moment, and the border police haven't got enough manpower to inspect all the packages that come in from abroad, which is where the problem probably lies, that part of it. But always when you're doing the review, just think about don't ever forget what you're trying to do. So, if you're trying to stop knife crime, it ain't the knife that commits the crime, it's the person that's holding it, and you've got to try and find out what that is, whether it's integration into the community, or they have a mental health problem, or whatever, which is what Prevent should have done in that. And it's much the same with communication as well. I'm used to using my NHS app to find out when I can renew my prescriptions and all that sort of thing, but not everybody is that tech savvy. And then you've got some that are too tech savvy and tend to do fake outrage on Facebook and the like, and say shock horror, which we all know about. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Atkins. Any other updates, or shall we move on from that? Okay. Item number 10 is the date of the next meeting. So the date of the next meeting is the 31st of March 2025. And turn the page, that's a good idea. Item number 11. Is this part of the private agenda now? Not item number 11. So this is. So we're still. Okay. So we've got okay, fine. Okay, so the Q2 performance report 24-25. I now invite the Communities, Open Spaces and Facilities Manager to provide a performance report update on the corporate plan for Q2. Please note that Appendix 2 and 3 will be considered in the private part of the meeting, so if councillors have any points to discuss on these sections, please raise them in the private part of the meeting.
Thank you, Chair. Of the corporate plan targets, there are 102 targets. Of those 102 targets, 79 are green, 6 are amber, 6 are red, and 11 are not due to be reported on. Of the 91 live targets, 86.8 are green, and then for both red and amber status, both are 6.59%. Happy to take any questions or take them back to the various managers or heads of service.
Thank you, Mike. Are there any questions from the committee? No. Oh, Councillor Wyman. That appendix, if there's Appendix 2 and Appendix 3 questions on those appendices, if not, they can be in the public part. No questions at the moment, so I'll go on and say we have 3 items to consider in private, so I'll now move that in accordance with Section 100, Part A, Part 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and the public to be excluded from the remainder of the meeting, and as it is likely, in view of the nature of the business to be transacted or the nature of the proceedings, that there would be disclosed as exempt information as defined in the paragraphs of Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act indicated in brackets before each item on the agenda. So we'll need a vote on this. I'll propose that. So do I have a seconder? Councillor Beach. We will now go to the votes. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. So we'll wait until members of the public have left and any live streams switched off.